Well, I think it was Nietzsche who said that creativity comes out of chaos. And, there's chaos in trying to reinvent yourself because you're going to make some missteps. That's part of the journey of life. And so, of course, I look back, there's some things I wish I would have done differently. It's not all easy, but you have to have, I think, a strong sense of vision and mission in your life and where you're going. Mine has been about service, both as an educator and now as an author and consultant. You can't just do it for the money. Yeah, the money is nice, but you have to be wanting to help people. If you can keep your eyes on that prize of trying to help people, and that's for me anyway, that keeps me going. And you talk about grace, you have to celebrate the small steps. I tell people all the time, okay, if you're stuck someplace, go help somebody. Go do something nice for somebody. You'll feel better about yourself and about your place in life here.
Many people think innovation belongs to a select few with the right title, funding, or perfect idea. What if that's not true? Welcome to Innovate Where You Are. I'm Christy Venny. Each episode, I talk with people across industries, builders, educators, founders, and students who are creating change in real time. We explore the messy side of innovation, the risks, pivots, and lessons behind the work. Because innovation starts with curiosity, takes courage, and begins right where you are. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Mark White, a leader, author, and consultant whose journey spans from education to private sector and now includes helping others navigate change and generational dynamics. In this conversation, we explore lifelong reinvention, leading through uncertainty, and how to move from surviving change to thriving in it. Mark White, I am so thrilled to have you on the show. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm honored to be here with you, Chrissy. Thanks for having me.
Let's dive right in. You describe yourself as a surfer on the waves of change. I love that phrase. What does that actually look like in practice?
I think I learned early in my life I needed constant change. I get bored too easily. And so it was only really in the last few decades of my life I started saying, that's just who I am. This change is in my DNA. I can't stop it. I've got to keep doing something. I have a history of walking away from some things at the height of my career and starting over. And that's the exciting part of it. And we can talk about that today. But what it looks like is constant adaptation, reinvention, looking at my life in chapters and stages.
I love that comparison. So a lot of people, though, aren't like that. They experience change as something that is happening to them. What allowed you to kind of own that and start moving with the change instead?
Well, I think that I'm a huge fan of Alvin Toffler. And Toffler was a futurist in the 20th century. He wrote about waves of history. And he says we look at history wrong. Instead of looking at it in decades and centuries, we need to look at it in waves of the agricultural wave and the industrial wave and the technology wave. Now we're in the AI wave, okay? In our lives, we look at when we were kids, when we were in high school, maybe college. We don't do enough to say who were we as people in those periods of time. And so I've noticed that my outlook somewhat has changed throughout my life and some of my politics, how I view working with people, just what I want to get out of life. And so people sometimes get caught up in this is who I am. This is who I'm stuck to be. As a boomer, and I wear this boomer shirt because I'm so much a boomer in some ways I am not. I thought when I got out of college, that's it, I'm done. I'm not going to change anymore because that was the boomer mentality. You conform. And I've learned there's a certain amount of conforming we have to do, but we've got to break out to be fresh and to be free. And you have to learn when you can break out, and that takes courage. It takes hard work. It takes commitment. It takes a passion. It depends on where you are in your life and what you can get done.
Well, I definitely want to get back to that boomer shirt you have on because I know your work now ties directly into that. And I think a lot of people are going to be very interested in hearing more. But until then, talk a little bit about the difference between surviving change and thriving in it. What is the distinction between those two things?
I think when you come to surviving, it depends on where you are in your life and the boundaries set upon you. And people don't realize sometimes that thriving can be a small step. It doesn't have to be redoing your entire life. Thriving is saying, how am I going to take this and use this disruption to see life in a better way, to be more successful, to be happier, whatever we're doing. We all have certain things that can confine us. Earlier in my life, when I was raising kids or had certain jobs, I wasn't as free as I am now, but I had to take small steps in something I read, something I did physically, someplace I went. I had to do something to keep growing. And I think that is thriving in it. Sometimes the more freedom you have, the bigger steps you can take. And that's when you really start to thrive. That's when you start to surf. I would even say that, I have gone from surfing now. And by the way, I just turned 66 years old. So I say that with pride because I don't hide my age, because I have been leading or helping to lead organizations for 4 decades now. All right. I looked at, oh my gosh, 4
That's
decades.
amazing.
I think that this last quarter of my life, whatever it is, I want this to be my best, maybe even the most growth. And so even I've gone from surfing, I call it, to kite surfing, to where you go flying out of the water. That's what I want to do now. And that's thriving. So how can you be a surfer or a kite surfer within where you are in your wave of life at that time?
That is energizing. Kite surfing sounds really fun. And I'm curious. So some folks get stuck though, and they are in that survival mode and they're not looking like you are for the opportunities to grow and change. Why do you think some people get stuck and don't see those opportunities like you're seeing them?
I think we measure our lives too many times with teaspoons instead of buckets. Okay. We tend to see this much in front of us because that's where we are. And I've been in that point before. Instead of seeing it like this, we measure it in rulers instead of tape measures. We have to look beyond where we are and say, look, okay, how am I going to use this part of my life to get to where I need to be? Because this part of my life is going to change. My kids are going to grow, or I'm going to grow. I'm going to get another job, or something's going to happen to where my life will be different. So how do I make that part of my life better?
Okay, so I heard several things you said that I think are really important to point out. There's an acceptance that change is going to happen, which I think we all know that. It's another thing to truly accept it and not fight it. You also mentioned kind of that how we measure. So I think of that also as zooming out, having a broader perspective on the whole timeline of life versus this small moment that can feel so strong and emotional when you're in it. But to be able to take a step back and think about the whole, that's also really important. And also giving yourself grace.
Yes.
Knowing that not everything's going to be smooth. When you're surfing the waves or kite surfing, it's going to be bumpy. But that could be part of the fun if you have the expectation it's coming and you're not looking for only that smooth sailing. The excitement is in the journey, the adventure. So I heard you say several things there that I think are really powerful.
Well, I think it was Nietzsche who said that creativity comes out of chaos. And, there's chaos in trying to reinvent yourself because you're going to make some missteps. That's part of the journey of life. And so, of course, I look back, there's some things I wish I would have done differently. It's not all easy, but you have to have, I think, a strong sense of vision and mission in your life and where you're going. Mine has been about service, both as an educator and now as an author and consultant. You can't just do it for the money. Yeah, the money is nice, but you have to be wanting to help people. If you can keep your eyes on that prize of trying to help people, and that's for me anyway, that keeps me going. And you talk about grace. You have to celebrate the small steps. I tell people all the time, okay, if you're stuck someplace, go help somebody. Go do something nice for somebody. You'll feel better about yourself and about your place in life here.
That's such a powerful piece of advice. I know I've done that myself, and that's one that my husband loves to say that too. Go out and help someone. If you're feeling stuck, help someone else. And that's not intuitive, because when you're not feeling good, sometimes you just want to go and crawl on the couch or in a dark room or get lost in a book or do something else. But when you get out and help someone, you truly can make a difference in someone else's life, and then you feel better. There's lots of studies that show that is an amazing way to combat when you're feeling low. So thinking about your career and how you have constantly evolved, and you've already mentioned, you've hinted at some of those changes. What did you have to let go of identity-wise in order to keep growing and not stay stuck?
I think identity-wise, you have to let go sometimes of being in control. Like I said, I've spent 4 decades leading or helping leaders, and leaders want to be in control. And the way the world is changing, the way the generations are changing, leaders often have less control now than they've ever had. You've got to be really into coaching. You have to give up sometimes the identity of being, I am the sure leader, get behind me, we're going to do this. That's very much a boomer mentality that is going away. Yet you also have to know when to step in and take control. And that is the art of leadership today. And so that takes a certain amount of creativity and adaptation in how you lead. So I would say just identity-wise, knowing who I am and knowing where I am going, giving things up. I gave up, I think, too small of a view of what I wanted to get done in life from when I was a young man to where I am now. I almost had to break out of I hate to keep knocking on boomers because I'm proud of being a boomer. I had to get out of my boomer mentality and adapt more of a millennial and Gen Z mentality of let's go with it. Let's connect to our passions. Let's get something done here. Let's help the world. Let's help ourselves and have fun.
That's really inspiring to think about how you shifted that thinking to be expanding your horizon, really. Do you think that the mentality of younger generations is that way because of the connectivity? Is it because of how our world is more global and they can see more without ever traveling even? They have the opportunity versus boomers? Or why do you think that shift has happened in those generations?
Everything you just said is part of it.
Okay.
Kids today are growing up together. The generational parts, the aspects are global. I was in Brazil helping lead training about a month ago. And I was hearing some of the same concerns generationally coming out of these leaders in South America for a Fortune 500 company I hear in North America, okay?
Wow.
The research shows it's global. So I think we are seeing some really positive things coming out of the younger people. Another thing that's causing this is the kids today are raised differently. When we talk about generational change, the trend begins with the older generations and accelerates through the younger generations in so many areas. One is in the parenting. When I was being raised by my greatest generation and silent generation parents, it was conform. You don't have much choices. Be happy with what you have. You have more than we had. So just accept it and move on. All the way to today to where kids are being given so many more choices. And what do you want for dinner tonight? Which house do you want us to buy? Which car do you like? Because some research I saw show that something like 72% of American parents, it's higher internationally, include their kids in the major decision-making of the family.
Wow.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just different. So when they come into life, they're growing up seeing things online. They're up-agers. The influencers are often teenagers. Mm-hmm. They're seeing that. They're given more choices. The parents are more like coaches instead of the disciplinarians. And so they come into adulthood saying, I want to do it this way. And so they want to chase their passions, but sometimes they get into an organization as a job. We have a boss saying, no, we need to do it this other way. Uh-huh. And that is what I'm hearing from some of the leaders out there, having to adjust. How do you coach young people and get them to do things the way that you want them to do it, at the same time tapping into their vision, their energy, and using their fresh ideas to help the organization?
Oh, yes, let's talk about that. So thinking about the role, you mentioned earlier, leadership of our boomer generation being about control. And now I think there is a lot more information and guidance for leaders about the value of creativity in leadership. And a lot of times people think creativity and they think, oh, creativity, that's for artsy fartsy folks. I was an art teacher for a decade. I embraced the visual arts and performing arts. And I feel differently. I think creativity has a role in lots of ways, a lot of places in our world that maybe it's underutilized. But from your perspective, what the leaders you work with, where does that creativity play a role in leadership versus, how people see it in the arts, for example?
Yeah, great question. My latest chapter I'm working on now is about creativity.
That's great.
And so you're right. And it's becoming much more valued now by business leaders because of the creativity needed to adapt to all these disruptions. Okay. So what I'm noticing is when I am writing for my editor and for the audience. I have an idea what they want from me, the editor to sell the books, and what the audience needs to see and wants to see. Those are pretty much my boundaries. However, as a former superintendent who broke out of the mold doing some pretty daring things, I also saw that I have more boundaries because I have a lot of team members looking up at me saying, we're doing what now? And I might have a school board looking at me saying, explain this to me now. What are we doing here? Same thing with business leaders. They have teams, they have bosses above them or boards. And so creativity sometimes gets lost. I was reading this blog about this one CEO got really upset, said, look, we've been talking about creativity. We have these people coming in. We have idea rooms. We have idea time, but yet nothing gets put into place. We're having creative thoughts, but the implementation is not there. So much of creativity and innovation is finding the barriers and getting around, through, or over those barriers. And to do that, you have to have a shared vision, and you have to have understand what are the barriers and what's going to happen when we start doing this. The shared vision is so critical because if people are with you, they're going to be more supportive of you. If they don't know what you're doing, they're going to be saying, this is being done to us. Why are we doing this? What's going on here?
So with creativity in leadership, identifying what those barriers are and having a vision forward. One of the books that I read recently that I really enjoyed was Idea Flow. And this was by Jeremy Utley. And he comes out of, I think, the Stanford D School. He spent some time there. But he talks about how you have to have lots and lots and lots of ideas, how you have divergent thinking and then you converge and then you diverge. So that design thinking process, the evolution of taking the ideas in their raw form and then finding the best ones, testing them in some way, and then refining them before you take them to market or you take them and roll them out with a full company. You know, the value of piloting. I think a lot of organizations think when they get together, you know, you get your team into the ideation room and you have a brainstorm, and people fall into the norms of work that they typically experience, that they're used to. And they throw some ideas out, and then it's like someone grabs onto an idea and they want to run with it, but they've only been there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and you don't ever get to the really good stuff where maybe people are throwing ideas out that they seem crazy, but they really have kernels of promising potential. And you have to give time and space and work with the culture of an organization, I think, to have them develop those ideas into something that could really take motion and be new and original and better, innovative. But sometimes we don't take the time to do that. And I wonder, that was a long way to go about saying the question I have for you. With boomer leaders who have a control mindset but are trying to be creative, how can you help them to be more open to creating that culture in their organization where people truly feel safe to ideate and to try things?
Now, I think a lot of that comes back to respect, mutual respect. We have to respect the young generations and what they bring to us. And sometimes the young generation feels disrespected because they think that they're not being listened to. The boomers and Gen Xers sometimes feel like they're being disrespected because people think they're too old. You know, when I go in and work in schools and businesses, I'm very much aware now that I'm many times the oldest person in the room. Sometimes I might be the only boomer in the entire room. And so I get that. That's the adaptation part of showing I understand you. I get where you are. That's a big part of it. But I just think it's a matter of listening and communicating. And I had this great story a while back from the book I did with Sammy Scarpetti, Forge in Leadership. We were interviewing a leader, and he said that his Gen Z employees come running to him with great ideas sometimes, but they haven't thought through, how are we going to implement this? What's going to happen here? He was saying, for example, the Gen Zers just want to throw it at the wall and start doing it. But you have to balance that with the experience of a Gen Xer or a boomer, maybe even a millennial leader who's been there, saying, whoa, let's slow down a little bit because we have to do this and this and this to make that happen. So that's a combination of bringing in the different talents of the team, the leadership talents versus the innovation talents coming from the younger generation.
That is such a great point about respect being foundational for building teams that are high functioning and leveraging the strengths of all the members of the team, all the different generations, all the mindsets, all the cognitive diversity that truly is there and tapping into it, because if people don't feel respected and don't feel safe, they're not going to share their brilliance. And so
No.
leaders have to be able to facilitate and create that sort of environment where great ideas can come to life. And so that respect piece, I hear you, and it seems so simple, and people, they'll say, yeah, people respect each other here. But I wonder.
No. See, creativity begins with culture, like you're saying.
Mhm.
And if you talk to leaders, no one's going to say, we have an awful culture. We have an awful culture and I don't care. If you ask a leader, do you have a good culture? He or she's going to say, well, yes, we have a really good culture. We have a great culture. And the thing is, it might not be bad, but it might not be good or great. There's something I call neutral. People just kind of there, and people will not take chances for you in their thinking and their actions until you get to that great culture. And that comes through caring, communication, shared vision, shared branding. All that comes together. That's when people relax. And that's when they really start thinking about, where can we go? What can I offer here? Otherwise, they stay to themselves and they sometimes go into survival mode for their job.
Well, definitely, I think you've nailed it there with neutral. I don't think anyone strives for a neutral culture. We
No,
want to have a wonderful culture where people are dying to get in and work and just want to be a part of this amazingness. But neutral, that's really not aspirational, is it?
no, it's not. No, it's
No.
not.
So you have helped organizations, all kinds, from school districts all over the country and companies all over the world, Fortune 500, Fortune 50. I mean, you've
Hmm.
helped leaders. Leaders are leaders, right?
Right.
They span industries, but you've really helped move people's thinking and helped them to change from how we've always done it, which that's a phrase that really gets me every time when someone says that. It's not it might be a reason why, but it's not a reason moving forward. But you are able to help leaders to look more forward at where the world is going. Why is that gap so hard to close? And how do you do that? How do you approach that challenge?
I think it's forming the collective vision. And sometimes when you work with leaders, you have to have these aha moments with them. For example, when I was working with these business leaders in South America, when I'm talking about, are you seeing this in these particular generations, these characteristics? And are you seeing this especially with helping your Gen Z workers? And they're quietly nodding their heads and they're looking at me like, oh my gosh, yes. So you try to help form the vision. Let's talk about how this might look better and be more effective. When I'm working with school, with educators, a key question I might ask is, okay, think about your students. When they graduate, they will be living these Gen Alphas and Gen Zs, soon to be Gen Beta in our schools. Mm-hmm. They will be living their adult lives in 2060, 2070, 2080. What are you doing right now to help them be successful in the last part of this century? And that's when it gets really quiet. And then you say, what are we going to do about this now? What can you do in your spot, wherever you are, your small spot, whatever, to make a difference for these kids? Or if you're a business leader, make a difference for your employees. So it's forming the vision and empowering them to do something. Mm-hmm. Take a small step if you can, a big step, depending upon where you are.
Wow. That framing, looking ahead to that far in the future, really makes me pause also and think differently. That framing it that way is powerful. Where do you see the biggest disconnect? So schools and businesses, they know they need to innovate. They want to innovate. Maybe they think they are, but there's a disconnect. Where do you see that often?
Here's something that was told to me by a CEO a while back. He said, I'm envious of schools. They have a constant revenue stream through their tax base, especially public schools. He goes, we don't. If he says, if we don't perform, we go out of business, we lose our jobs, something negative happens to us. Educators can reset because they've got the money still coming in. As much as I adore educators and I respect them as a former educator, with some of them, there's a certain complacency because they know, okay, well, this didn't go well, but I'll have a job next year and I'll keep on going, right? We've got that going. We've got these barriers placed upon educators by politicians, especially state legislators. I cannot stand to hear ever again we're reinventing education when we're not reinventing education. I always say that in education, we are the Ford Taurus of the 1990s. Best-selling car. We just keep repainting it. We keep putting in new upholstery. We're kind of like the Cuban cars you see from the 90s and 60s. We keep on running, right? We still have about the same calendar, testing a lot of the same subjects, a lot of the same number of days, a lot of the same routines. Yes, we've updated our standards, our technology, some of our courses, but we haven't gone far enough. And I think that disconnect is we keep our American educators who are so creative in a box. And some of our leaders are not creative enough in the business side or the education side. That's a human thing. That's a human leadership thing. As a matter of fact, I'll say this, as a former superintendent, I have found that sometimes the higher up you go, the harder it is to be creative because you have so many pressure points on you saying you've been successful in the system. We've got a good school system here and maintain the status quo. And I had a lot of support in changing things, but I know how frightening that can be to try to change some things also. I had some school board members who were awesome, some who were not. A lot of community members who were very supportive, some who were kind of questioning. In the business side, you have to worry about the profits. You make a mistake, you could be career ending for you. So, I mean, there are a whole lot of, you have to go overcome fear. Creativity is about overcoming fear. And that's a part of overcoming your emotions. I know us like to wake up at 3 a.m. when we were building Clark Hall, this amazing new type of high school, thinking, I hope this works. I hope this works because it's a small part of it, only like $20 million, but that's 20 million taxpayer dollars. And it worked. So, I mean, you have to take chances. You have to take deep breaths, be able to project out, see where you want to go, take a step at a time, keep the narrative positive. Keep forming that narrative in your mind and what you're sharing with people. And that's what a lot of leaders don't do enough of, I think.
I'm glad you brought up Clark Hall. I know when I opened Emerald Campus, which is similar innovative facility within a district that is a little bit more traditional. One of the challenges, my hope for Emerald Campus was that it would be a lab school that could inform the other comprehensive schools in the district, the high schools, to change and to be able to grow and continue to evolve with a safe place for testing and piloting the latest, greatest ideas and giving people an environment to learn those strategies. And it didn't really work that way like I hoped it would. Clark Hall was before Emerald Campus. It was one of the places I remember looking and learning and talking to you. There's a few pockets of these innovative facilities and education, and corporations have them as well. I know Cardinal Health had Fuse, which was their lab for innovation where I live in Dublin, where they could try out new ideas and test things before they took them big to market. And I think the model works of having a safe place to test ideas. But if organizations really want to create incremental change, what do you think are some other strategies that can create momentum? What are a couple things they can do to take steps forward?
Well, I think something to remember too is that you might be onto something before other people can understand it. You know, like when we built Clark Hall and opened in 2012, it was selected by Scholastic as one of the 5 most innovative school buildings in the entire world.
Wow.
And now when we build high schools and all kinds of schools, we build those kinds of spaces, not because of Clark Hall, but because we happen to see, working with Dwight Carter and Greg Morris, our superintendent, the board, very carefully, here's where students are going. Here's where learning space is going. And so sometimes you're ahead of the curve. And Gahanna Lincoln, in this district where I used to work, just opened a big new high school, has a lot of these learning spaces, and people are walking in saying, oh, this is just like Clark Hall was way back in 2012. Yeah. So sometimes you have to just keep on going, knowing this is the right thing. The people who are using it get it. And the people who see it, look at it carefully, get it. But that might be the end of it. I think it's about, again, the shared vision and what you can do communication-wise. I don't think that back then, that was a different era. We could have done more to communicate to the world what we were doing in that building. So I think it's helping people to see it, because sometimes people have to see the concept to understand it. If they read about it, just see pictures, that might not be enough.
I think that's a great point, that you have to allow some time for others to come along, because early adopters who are right there at the beginning, excited about change, people like you and I who thrive on this and enjoy it. We actually enjoy it. Most people look at us and go, wait, what, you like this? Are you crazy? It's just how we're wired. I think it's okay that not everyone is wired the same, because can you imagine if everyone was wired this way? There would be a little bit of chaos if we're all constantly churning and changing. I think it's good to have a mix of personalities and preferences and work styles, just like you mentioned with the different generations and the perspectives, as long as we have people with openness to what's possible and we're able to, like you said, have leaders who bring people along and show the value and communicate it. For leaders, that's really important. And I think that is one of those shifts to create momentum, is that positive communication, showing the return on investment of this strategy or this approach that is maybe new. Are there any other things you would add that are important for leaders who want to make change? Any steps they should take?
You brought up something, you touched upon something there. I think it's diversity within your team, diversity of thought, because you're right. We don't want all creators. We don't want all people who are going to be traditionalists. But how do you bring people along so you can hear all their viewpoints? And remember this too, that if you are a really creative, innovative person, you want to do something differently. If you can have a traditionalist be with you and understand, that person's going out saying, oh, I get it, because people tend to flock together. You know, we're all like kids in the middle school cafeteria, okay? We kind of hang out with the people who we like, who are like us. And so these people all get together and talk. And so when they start sharing positive things about, oh, here's what we're going to do, it's going to work, because it's not just coming from the leader, that is critical. And so many leaders don't get that. Still too many leaders are dictatorial, and they announce something. And when I work with leaders, I'm saying, how can you run this past an advisory group or a small department first, and just start small and learn from it and go. And don't think that you have to make all the decisions here.
I'm glad you brought that up. Some of the leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with that are most successful are not the command and control types. And there's a lot out there in our boomer generation who really just want to command and control. But the ones who inspire, the ones who seek input, who have 100 little tiny conversations about a new idea to kind of feel it out and see feedback from their team and from people in different roles. And then they're not the ones that necessarily roll it out. Somebody else they talk to maybe picks it up and says, I would love to lead this. And they empower them and they let them lead that work and they support it. And so and maybe it is forming teams, cross-functional teams, or really getting input from those who are most affected by that change early in the very beginning, not after you've developed something and you think you have the right solution, you haven't even talked to those who will be affected, whether it's a customer or students in the case of schools or parents. I think that's really important and it makes a lot of sense. One of the other things that I think you have also been working on is, how do we help people, when we talked about identity earlier, how do we help people to develop their own personal brand? Young people and even adults too, how do we help them to have that fit with the work that they're doing? The person, the identity they want to project.
I think that the personal branding is becoming more and more important because of what AI is doing to the world. I always say that personal branding puts the person in person. It makes you more personal. It separates you from the chatbots. And research is out there showing that, first of all, millennials who started the branding and the Gen Zers, they want to work for somebody, regardless of the generation, who wants to have a strong brand, a personal brand. And whenever the company brand and all the personal brands in the generations are aligned, data shows that productivity rises. Profits go up.
Wow.
And so for some of the older, the Gen Xers or boomers say, I don't need a brand, not into that. Well, you have a brand in a way. You have a reputation, whether you know it or not. So I think the branding is important because we have to ask, do we shape our brand? Does our brand shape us? Both are okay. You know, because I think a brand can help you form goals and who you want to be, help you do a lot of reflecting on what's happened to you, what's formed you, how are you viewed. A brand is not just how you are viewed. It's not just something online. It's your goals and how you conduct yourself. Yes, online, but in person with people, and how you use your career, your strengths, your milestones to get to where you need to be. Something I do in workshops is I might have people draw a straight line across a page. And I'll say, this is the timeline of your life. We have number lines. This is the number line of your life. Put an X about where you think you are. Now go back and look at the major events of your life, the milestones, those waves, the mentors you had, the promotions you got, maybe graduation, maybe something personal. What are they? Pick out 5 or 6 things that shaped you. That's shaping your brand. Now go beyond the X to the future. And where do you want to go? Write 4 or 5 of them down. how can your brand that is you formed and can form help you get to where you want to be? And so the branding, I think, goes both ways in helping us shape who we are, and it shapes, we shape it also.
Mark, that's so powerful, the reflection piece of how you facilitate that. Because I think you're right. A lot of people might write it off and say, oh, I'm not into that. I don't do social media, or I'm not. But really, it's just being aware, self-aware, and thinking about what you're putting out and what you want to put out. So what do we project to the world? What image are we sharing? We're all doing it, regardless
Right.
of if you think you are or you have a brand. Everyone does in some way. So, but it's also malleable. It can change and shift.
Yes.
And being intentional with that, how you want to be perceived and what kind of change you want to make on this world, how you present yourself. I think about, for a long time, I got to work with students in high school and talk to them about how they present themselves on a resume or on LinkedIn or in interviews. And I think about personal brand for people I've worked with in private sector, also thinking about putting your best foot forward and what you want to be known for. You do have some say in that. There is some control and agency, and that can be really empowering if you choose to shape that and you choose to put time and energy into it. And I don't think it's not about ego either. It's just about, it's the same thing as getting dressed in the morning, really. You make decisions, so why not make good decisions? What do you think is at stake if people ignore this, if they choose not to define their personal brand?
If you don't, you will not achieve what you need to achieve in today's world. Let's look at it this way too. Millennials and Gen Zers make up the bulk of the global workforce. They are very much into branding. Branding is not going away. So it's going to become even stronger. So if you're a Gen Xer or a Boomer saying, I don't need a brand, yes, you better have one, because they want to work for people with strong brands. It will help you grow, help the organization grow. And think about the future of this. I saw the other day that LinkedIn estimates that about 20% of its people who use it are ages 18 to 24 years old. So LinkedIn's becoming much more popular at the university level. There are now high school students opening LinkedIn accounts. High school students are thinking about their brand, maybe without even thinking it's a brand. As an example, and you live in a very high achieving community. I've worked in those communities also. And so a lot of students in the past, high school students, have done activities that looks great on a college admissions applications, whether they really wanted to or not. They did those activities, right? Volunteered here, got this job, took this course or whatever. Research is showing now that the Gen Alphas, who almost make up all the K-12 schooling in America, we have Gen Zers at the senior level or next year, they are much more aligned with their passions and how they choose their activities. Yes, they want to use those activities to maybe get into a college, but they're much more likely to choose activities they care about. And they're going to say, how can I do this and turn this into something for my college application? So they are already aligning with their brand. It's going to be even stronger with all the alphas that are coming up and the betas. We are in an individualized society now. We have so many more choices. As a boomer, I always go back to that. In many ways, I've been blessed. To understand it, I've gone from the 3 TV channels to now all the thousands of streaming options I have on YouTube and all the Netflix and Hulu and everything like that, right? It's on-demand entertainment, on-demand options. We used to not have that. That's all these kids know. And all these kids are going to know is AI. So, the people like the boomers and the Xers have to adapt to this world. Bring the strengths, don't throw everything out, but be open to learning new ways of looking at the world and how we do these things.
I think it's interesting. You and I both were pretty early adopters of AI. We did a lot of experimenting and used the tools in many ways. But we've had conversations around how that human element matters so much. We have to, as leaders, and you being a boomer and me and the next generation, we're just like at the top of leadership, but also kind of on our way out. Like, we have to understand how these younger generations are thinking about technology. And I know some of my own children. So I've got Gen Alphas at home and one's about to leave, and thinking about their view on technology and how they use the tools is really helpful. It changes my usage of the tools as well. They're pushing back a little bit on AI and saying, well, you know what? I don't want to use it for everything. That looks just AI. Like, I don't want to consume that. I want something real and authentic. They want to have in-person experiences, and they want to be with other people their age in person. They've had all the technology to connect, but they want to have the real deal. And I
Right.
think in the workplace, for people our age who are leading, to really recognize and be empathetic and cognizant of those intentional decisions this younger generation is making. Yes, with branding and how we define ourselves, but also just how they're using the technology could be really helpful. It seems like there's probably a lot of other conflict areas that maybe come up with the generations. What do you think we're getting wrong right now with these differences in generations?
What I fear is going to go wrong is that we will rely so much as leaders on AI that we lose some of our humanness, some of our humanity, and how we treat people, the potential of humans to be problem solvers. I think like your kids sometimes pushing back on AI. And on my next book, Storm of the Souls, I'm writing with Sammy Scarpetti. It's called Storm of the Souls, SOS, Leading Human Teams in an AI World.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'm going back and pulling in the humanities, for example, to talk about branding. I start with a poem, part of a poem from Walt Whitman's Song on Myself. It's the opening of my branding chapter. I celebrate myself and sing myself. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. And that's his brand. And that comes through in his writing. He didn't know he was doing a brand, but it was so strong in what he was doing. And when we talk about Whitman, we talk about his beauty, his free verse, his transparency, which is something we love to see in brands today. And so I think that we need to see that thread of humanity coming through the centuries, coming through the AI to remind ourselves, look, we're still into writing, still into art, still into sculpture. We want beautiful things. So let's not forget that AI can do a lot of wonderful things. I love AI, but it scares me because sometimes I think I might be relying on it too much now in my own life. But we have to look at it like this. As a boomer, I was taught to use a slide rule in junior high. And that's when calculators are just coming in, okay? And people were saying, well, what are you going to do when the calculators don't work? All right. And then we've gone to using the internet. And people said, what are you going to do when the internet doesn't work? Well, we solved that. And now people are saying, well, we can't be using AI for all this stuff. Well, maybe we can use it for a lot, okay? Because every time we say we can't do it, we do it anyway. But this is such a generational, society changing, global changing phenomenon, this AI, that we don't know where it's all going to go. This is not just solving math problems on a calculator or searching something with the internet. This is changing how we're going to live, how we work, what we do, the money we make. It's scary. As a matter of fact, this research is showing that two of the biggest fears for the Gen Alphas, Gen Z, and the betas will be, what is AI going to do to their world? Will they be able to work? And how is climate change going to affect them in 2060, 70, 80, 90? And so we have to be aware of that too. So, I mean, we have to look at all that as we help navigate these disruptive times we're in.
So thinking of your book that is going to be coming out that you're working on right now, can you give us any sneak peeks, any sort of advice or guidance for leaders of how to navigate these times that are changing so quickly?
Well, when I'm writing, I'm sort of trying to hit a moving target here because things are changing so quickly.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm sort of seeing here. I'm seeing these companies do mass layoffs at times of hundreds or thousands of people being let go because AI can do it now. And I'm not saying we can stop that because, like I said, we have to survive and make money in companies. And I'm not going to tell people, no, don't lay people off because that's what's going to happen sometimes. But how are we doing that? Are we being kind to people? Are we trying to help them? What are we doing as a society to adapt to this? To say, this is where we're going, but how do we make sure nobody's left behind and that we don't have a few people at the top doing most of the work and everyone else is scrounging around in some dystopian society trying just to get something to eat? And that's kind of a fear that these young people have, and I can understand that fear. So how can we treat each other with kindness in this disruptive AI age? That's what I'm trying to get in this book here.
Oh, that's beautiful and so important. It makes me think there's a lot of opportunity for social entrepreneurs to look at this. Like a lot of our young people are wanting to be entrepreneurs. They do want to have a positive impact on society and do good. And I just feel like every crisis is an opportunity. And I don't mean that in a bad way. We can't prevent them all. The crises are going to happen. But if we look at it as a way that we can actually make positive change, I think the picture you painted does tee up an opportunity for problem solving. And we know this is potentially coming. How do we start working now? How can our young, brilliant people start thinking on this right now?
Right.
Regardless of what age they are. I think, whether you're a boomer or whether you're Gen Alpha, like, you can work on these problems. And I hope that there are enough people motivated, that are curious, that want to dig into them, because it's so right now, you've defined in my mind what we all should be thinking about.
I think it's going to be one of the great challenges of humanity. How do we balance AI and being human?
It's amazing. It's not something I would have ever predicted that
I
I'd see
know.
in my lifetime.
I know, and we can only try to imagine what's coming next, right?
Oh my gosh. That makes me think about mentorship, actually. Generations that can guide others from their experiences and help the next generation to learn, and to also learn from the next generations, because it's twofold. It's a mutualistic relationship that's beneficial. There's research studies on how beneficial it is to both people in a relationship, a mentorship relationship. And I know you actually mentored me. I had the privilege. That's how we met in education, when I was just becoming an administrator, and you were a seasoned administrator who had seen so much and had so many accomplishments. And I know that was extremely pivotal and foundational in creating my view, my perspective on leadership. And I appreciate that. And I hope I've said that to you, but it's been very, very important to me. What do you think is so important right now for people in mentorship and helping others to evolve and grow?
So much of coaching and mentorship is meeting people where they are. That's the first thing. For example, with you, I remember how sharp you were. And you remember I gave you a huge project, the Peace Week initiative we were doing.
Oh, that was
fun.
I
said, just go do it. Because I trusted you. You were hyper sharp and I didn't have to look over your shoulder. I think leadership is hiring great people and turning them loose. Okay. And a lot of people said that was one of the best Peace Weeks we'd ever had because of what you had done. And so many times leaders don't understand that if you just do that, we're all going to look better. Sometimes the leaders can't let go and have to take all the credit. And that's not helping anybody. So you have to meet people where they are. If you are ready to thrive and ready to fly, some people just need to try to survive. I might work with some out there as a consultant now, working with some young leaders who are struggling because they're trying to micromanage, or they're not communicating well, or something like that. So know where they are. But you mentioned something else about it going back and forth. The idea of reverse mentoring has never been more important. And that's what Sammy Scarpetti and I talk about in our trainings about the generational work, tapping into the strengths of the younger generations, especially with technology and innovation and fresh ideas. And how do you balance all of that? So it used to be you always had the senior person mentoring the younger person. That's still needed because there's a lot of great experience in the boomers and Gen Xers. But many times now, how can you help a Gen Zer or a younger, really innovative millennial help a Gen Xer or Gen Zer understand either technology, societal trends, what's going on in the world? So there's never been as much of a need for the cross-generational mentorship.
That's amazing. I love that perspective. And it makes me think of something. So your book in For Gen Leadership, there was a part that I was rereading it the other day, and I actually changed my practice when you wrote about, I'm finding it here, I marked it with a Post-it.
This is scary when people always quote my words back to me, okay? Just saying.
Well, there is so much in this book that to pull from and use in directly. Like, this is stuff that I can use and apply with the work that I do. And I know a lot of people, I've recommended this book to so many people because it transcends industries, and it really helps in a way that this is not advice and guidance that I've found elsewhere. So this is a unique book, and I'm sure your next one will be too. You know, I will read that and probably quote it also. In here, though, you talk about professional learning and how to plan training sessions, keeping in mind the different generations that are present in your session. And before I read this, I'd never thought of that. And I have to tell you, when I plan sessions, I am meticulous. I take days and days and days for a one-day session, a half-day session. I plan so carefully and thoughtfully, but I missed this. Can you talk a little bit about that mindset for leaders who are planning and trying to help learners? Because
Mhm.
a lot of learning, a lot of these PD sessions people sit through, I mean, I know you and I have been in some that are not great too. Sometimes they just fall short. It's not worth the
Right.
time, the
Right.
investment. How can you keep that in mind with the generational differences and do better?
I've had to evolve so much in all of my training. It's partly because of all now these generation gaps between the four generations in the workforce. For example, if you have to keep it moving, I say that I talk about, we have to teach everybody as if they're Gen Z almost, okay? Because we have become audience Z because of our phones. Even the older generations have shorter attention spans. So you have to keep it moving. You have to make your training like it's an elementary lesson. Elementary classroom lessons, I love elementary teachers. They can do something every 10 minutes, man. They just
They're
keep
so
on moving,
good.
keep on moving.
Yes.
Same thing in training. That different things might be standing up, going to a different part of the room, talking to somebody, and using technology, interacting with a Padlet or a Mentimeter or something on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
As an example of generations, I'm looking to see how many boomers do we have in the room and how many Gen Xers like me
Mm-hmm.
who might not know how to use technology.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is point your phone at the screen and hit the QR code, okay?
Mhm.
And it's amazing. I'm looking around when they're coming in saying, that's where I'm going, that's where I'm going, that's where I'm going. When I
Mm-hmm.
give them these instructions, I'm going to go stand in that part of the room because they might need me,
Yeah.
okay? I also know that if I don't do that, I have some millennials and Gen Z are saying, how come we're not using technology for this?
Mm-hmm.
I've led some online trainings where I've had just the looks from some of the younger people as the older people asking, how do I open that browser now? What do I do now?
Oh,
And they're
man.
looking at me like, oh no. So yeah, I mean, you have to be aware of that. Like I said, you have to use movement now. You have to be aware of the rigor of upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy or Webb's DOK, depth of knowledge. Get people thinking. People want to think. Gamification is good, especially young people growing up playing games. I play Xbox, with my son. He lives in the state of Washington. And sometimes we get together and play. I tell boomers, you got to be gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Because besides being high rigor, it helps you connect with some of the younger generations. I've done
Mm-hmm.
that and talking with people also. I mentioned that and they ask me what I play. So, I mean, gamification is important in the trainings, the movement, the rigor, how you use technology, when you use it. It's the pacing is so critical these days. People get bored so easily.
I want to talk about that just a little bit more because I think that's also in the book. It talks about attention span and
Yes,
how it's changed over time. You mentioned because of technology, our phones, we're all a little less attentive than we used to be, but it didn't used to be that long to begin with. Can you
right.
talk a little more about that?
Yeah, well, research is showing that attention spans are dropping.
Mm.
In other words, it's down to a few seconds now, really. It doesn't mean that we can't pay attention. It just means that after 7 or 8 seconds, we want to grab our phones or we start thinking about something else. The movie we saw on Netflix last night or something we're going to do when we get home or that something in our office we want to look at email or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to work really hard to get people's attention. So people will pay attention to you, but you have to use a hook. You have to use a lot of these things we were talking about, the open-ended questioning, the involvement. It can be done, but training today is harder than it's ever been because of the different generations and the shorter attention spans.
Do you think that that also applies to facilitating meetings for
Oh,
leaders?
yes.
They also need to think about these concepts because meetings, gosh, we sit in meetings every single day, whether it's Zoom or in person. And sometimes you wonder, do I even need to be here?
Yeah.
And it's hard to pay attention if it's not done well. So that also translates, right?
But yes, that's a huge complaint from Gen Zers because they get really mad with some of the Boomer and Gen X agendas and they're thinking, why am I here? Couldn't you just send this to me in an email or talk or just why are we doing this? I have things to do. There's something out there that says that Gen Z or some research they want to interact frequently with their managers, but they want the meetings to be very short. Okay. And so I think when we have meetings, especially group meetings, team meetings, we have to have a clear agenda, maybe share the agenda beforehand, keep it on time, keep it on task, get people out and back to their desks, get back to their offline or whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. I really like that. So as we're getting near the end of our time together, I want to circle back on this concept of catching the wave of change and ask you, what does it look like to be courageous in the middle of change? Or, because it's easy to say after you've done accomplished things and you're like, gosh, yeah, that went well. And that's wonderful, right? The after's easy once you get through it. But when you're in the middle of it, how does that work for you when it is in the uncomfortable, ambiguous place that the change is happening?
I think it's staying in touch with your vision and mission and your brand. Because when things are swirling around you and you're not sure what's happening, how it's going to come out, I come back sometimes, I ask, do I really have any choice? I have to be doing it like this, because if I don't, I'm going to be miserable. I've learned that about myself already. At this point in my life, I got to try this. When I'm writing is hard work. People say, I want to write a book. Okay, well, as Hemingway said, just sit at the keyboard and bleed. That's what writing is, okay? Because writing is all this chaos in your mind swirling around you, and you're pulling through it, divergent, convergent thinking, trying to see what works, what doesn't work. And so you really have to take it a step at a time, be in touch with who you are, what your mission is, what you're trying to do here, and celebrate the small victories.
That's amazing. I love that. So let's do a couple rapid fire questions, just a couple
Okay.
quick ones. Let's start with a belief about leadership that you've changed.
A belief I've changed is I am no longer the supreme leader. I am the leader/supreme coach.
Oh, I like that. Lovely. What is a habit that keeps you growing?
Every day, there are two, I would say two. Every day I make a list of things I want to get done for the day. And I've read where a lot of successful people do that. I use Google Keep, so I can refer to it the previous day and cross things out, but I want to know what am I going to accomplish? Have I had a good day or not? So I'm very goal driven. The other thing is I have goals for my year, areas in which I want to grow either physically or intellectually through my reading, my writing, or something like that. So for me, it's keeping goals, all types of goals.
I do that too, all those things, Mark. And you know what? A lot of people think creative people, innovative people, that they don't have that level of organization, but I would argue, I think it's essential. I think that for me personally, and it sounds like for you too, yeah, you have to have some linear structure when you have a lot of creativity that is not limiting, it's actually focusing the energy. So,
well, I think it goes back to the creativity, they say, can be 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. And you got to work hard. If you're going to be an entrepreneur or be creative, there's a lot of work in there. Golden words just don't fly out of your mouth, You've got to really work at this and have this planned and organized.
Yes, absolutely. All right, last one. What are you most excited about right now?
In my professional life, looking at writing my book, Storms of the Soul, because this is a deep dive into something I really care about. And I'm having a lot of fun with it when it goes well. When it doesn't go well, it's horrible. When it's going well. The other thing is I'm about to launch a podcast with Sammy Scarpetti called Generation Nation.
Yay!
In which we're going to dive into the new generation gaps, see what's there, and see how to build bridges. That'll be launched this summer.
Mark, that is so exciting. And I love that you keep giving me more things to read and listen to keep me learning. And I have a feeling after people have heard this, they're going to want to learn from you more too. So thank you for sharing. Yes, you have been an inspiration as always. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk with you, Christy.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Innovate Where You Are. Check the show notes for links and resources from today's conversation. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Christy Venny. Until next time.